An unlimited pages original short story, The Wrong Passenger. Some journeys begin with a single choice. Others begin with a stranger waiting in the rain. Tonight's story is about kindness, promises, and a mystery that refuses to be forgotten. Now, turn the page. The woman never asked for a ride. She never waved. She never stepped toward the road. She simply stood beneath a lonely bus stop in the middle of nowhere, waiting. If Daniel Mercer had kept driving that night, he would have been dead 12 minutes later. Daniel didn't know that, of course. All he saw was a woman standing alone in the rain on a highway where no buses had run for decades. Most people would have kept going. Daniel couldn't. He had lived by one rule for nearly 15 years. If you could safely help someone, you stopped. The rule wasn't born from courage. It came from gratitude. When Daniel's younger sister Emily was 19, her car broke down during a winter storm. Dozens of drivers passed without slowing. Then an older man in a faded green pickup pulled over. He gave her his coat. He stayed until help arrived. When Emily tried to pay him, he simply smiled and said 4 words. Someone should always stop. Daniel never forgot those words. Neither did Emily. Ever since, whenever he saw someone stranded, he thought of the man in the green pickup. Maybe someone else would stop. Maybe no one would. The rain hammered against the windshield. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. Ashford was still 26 miles away. The radio had gone silent 20 minutes earlier after a burst of strange static, and what had sounded disturbingly like someone trying to say his name. He had convinced himself he'd imagined it. Now there was only the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers and the empty highway stretching into darkness. Lightning split the sky. For the briefest instant, he saw her, a woman, standing beside an old bus stop that shouldn't have been there. The next flash revealed something even stranger. She wasn't standing beneath the shelter. She stood out in the rain, and yet, her coat was perfectly dry. Daniel pulled onto the shoulder. The woman didn't rush toward the car. She walked at an unhurried pace, calm, measured, as though she'd known he was going to stop. When she reached the passenger door, she paused. For just a moment, she looked at Daniel through the rain-speckled window. Something about her expression unsettled him. She wasn't relieved. She wasn't frightened. She looked sad. Daniel unlocked the door. She climbed inside and closed it gently behind her. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice was warm, quiet, the kind of voice that instantly put people at ease. Daniel smiled. "No problem." He eased the car back onto the highway. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The heater filled the cabin with warm air. Rain continued drumming against the windshield. Daniel glanced toward her. She rested both hands in her lap. Her dark coat was immaculate. Not a single drop of water clung to the fabric. He glanced at her boots. Clean. Dry. He looked back at the road. Maybe she'd been standing inside the shelter. Maybe that's all it was. "I'm Daniel." She turned her head slowly. "You shouldn't tell strangers your name." Daniel laughed. "My sister tells me the same thing." A faint smile touched her lips. It lasted only a second. Then it was gone. "She's worried about you." Daniel chuckled. "She usually is." "No." The woman looked back through the windshield. "I mean tonight." His smile faded. Emily had called before he'd left his mother's house. She'd begged him to wait until morning. The storm was getting worse. He hadn't mentioned that conversation to anyone. He hadn't even answered her last text. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. That's a pretty lucky guess. I wasn't guessing. She spoke so quietly, he almost thought he'd imagined it. Trying to shake the unease creeping into his chest, he changed the subject. So, where are you headed? North. Anywhere in particular? She hesitated. Somewhere I never reached. Daniel glanced at her. What does that mean? You'll understand. She answered as though the explanation should have been obvious. Daniel searched the road ahead. No cars, no houses, no gas stations, nothing. Did your car break down? I don't have one. You walked? Yes. From where? She didn't answer. Another silence settled between them. Oddly, it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt heavy, as though the car carried words neither of them knew how to say. A bolt of lightning illuminated the forest. For an instant, the trees stood like silent witnesses lining the road. The woman spoke again. You love teaching. Daniel turned toward her. What? You make history feel alive. He stared. How could you possibly know that? She didn't answer. Instead, she asked, do your students still complain about the Civil War exam? Every muscle in Daniel's body tightened. Only his students knew about that test, not even his family. He swallowed. Who are you? She watched the rain sliding down the windshield. I wish I could answer that. The dashboard clock changed to 11:52 p.m. The woman leaned forward slightly. The bridge is coming. Daniel frowned. I don't remember a bridge. You will. Another mile slipped by. Then a weathered green sign emerged from the darkness. River Bridge, 2 miles. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He looked back at the woman. She wasn't watching the sign. She wasn't watching him. She was staring into the darkness beyond the reach of the headlights. Almost as though she wasn't waiting to see what would happen. She was remembering it. For the first time that night, Daniel realized he wasn't afraid of the storm. He was afraid of the woman sitting beside him. The rain intensified. The windshield wipers struggled to keep pace, sweeping back and forth in a frantic rhythm that seemed slower with every passing second. Daniel glanced at the dashboard clock. 11:54 p.m. He couldn't shake the feeling that time itself had begun to move differently. Beside him, the woman sat motionless. Her eyes never left the road. You've been here before. It wasn't really a question. Yes. Recently? She hesitated. A long time ago. Daniel frowned. Then how do you know this road so well? I remember every mile. Her answer lingered in the silence, not because it explained anything, but because it explained nothing. The forest began to thin. Ahead, the highway dipped gently before disappearing into darkness. Then Daniel saw it. The bridge. Steel guardrails stretched across the river like black ribs fading into the storm. A yellow warning sign flashed past. Bridge may ice during storms. Daniel forced a smile. So this is the famous bridge. The woman didn't smile back. Instead, her fingers tightened around the edge of the seat. It was the first genuine emotion Daniel had seen from her. Fear, not for herself, for him. Slow down, she whispered. Daniel looked ahead. The bridge was empty. No headlights, no taillights, nothing. We're the only ones out here. Please. Her voice cracked. Just once. Slow down. Daniel had no reason to listen. Every instinct told him the road was clear. But something deeper, something he couldn't explain, made him ease his foot off the accelerator. 52. 48. 43. 38. The car rolled quietly onto the bridge. The sound changed instantly. The tires echoed across the hollow steel beneath them. Rainwater sprayed outward in shimmering arcs. Then Daniel noticed something strange. Fresh skid marks. Not one. Not two. Dozens. Black streaks scarred the wet pavement. Some ended at the guardrail. Others disappeared toward the river. "Those weren't here before," he murmured. "They always are." Daniel looked at her. "What?" "The rain washes them away." She swallowed. "But they always come back." Lightning split the sky. For a fraction of a second, the bridge was as bright as day. Daniel saw dents in the guardrails, scraped paint, twisted steel, scars left behind by crashes over countless years. Darkness returned. The woman spoke in barely more than a whisper. "Keep both hands on the wheel." Daniel obeyed without thinking. Only after tightening his grip did he realize he'd done exactly what she'd asked. He glanced at the clock again. 11:56 p.m. Only 2 minutes had passed. It felt like 20. Then, far ahead, 2 headlights appeared, small, unsteady, growing larger. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "He's moving fast." "I know." The pickup truck barreled toward them. Its headlights bounced wildly across the bridge. For a moment, it seemed perfectly under control. Then its right tires struck standing water. The truck lurched violently. Its rear end swung sideways. The driver overcorrected. The pickup spun. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. The truck crossed the center line, straight toward them. Oh no. Instinctively, Daniel started to turn the wheel. "Don't!" The woman's voice filled the car. "Hold your line." The pickup slid sideways, completely out of control. Its headlights flooded Daniel's windshield. Time seemed to stop. 30 feet. 20. 10. Daniel gripped the steering wheel with everything he had, because he had slowed, because he hadn't swerved. The pickup missed the front of his car by inches. It shot across his path, then slammed broadside into the bridge railing. The explosion shook the entire bridge. Metal screamed. Glass burst into the storm. The guardrail buckled inward with a deafening crash. Daniel's sedan rolled to a stop. His breathing came in short, ragged bursts. He stared through the windshield. If he'd been driving even 10 miles per hour faster, the pickup would have struck his driver's door. There would have been no chance to escape. None at all. His hands trembled. Slowly, he turned toward the passenger seat. "You saved my life." The woman met his eyes. Tears shimmered there. "I couldn't save everyone." Before Daniel could respond, the blare of a tractor-trailer's horn echoed from the far end of the bridge. Instinctively, he looked into the rearview mirror, only for a heartbeat. When he turned back, the passenger seat was empty. The seatbelt remained fastened. The door was still locked. No sound, no footsteps, no trace that anyone had ever been there. Except for one thing. Resting neatly on the seat was an old paper bus ticket. Its edges were worn. Its ink had faded with time. Daniel picked it up carefully. The destination read, Ashford. His eyes drifted to the date. The ticket had been issued. Exactly 3 years earlier. For several seconds, Daniel couldn't move. Rain hammered against the windshield. The tractor-trailer's horn echoed across the bridge. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it. The passenger seat was empty. The old bus ticket rested where the woman had been sitting only moments before. "No," Daniel whispered. "That's impossible." Another blast of the truck's horn snapped him back to reality. The pickup driver. Daniel slipped the ticket into his jacket pocket, threw open the door, and ran into the storm. The cold rain hit him like ice. The pickup had crumpled against the bridge railing. Steam poured from beneath the hood. The driver's airbag had deployed. Inside, a middle-aged man struggled against his seatbelt. Daniel reached the door. "Don't move." The driver looked at him with frightened eyes. "I never even saw you." "I know." "The truck." "It just started sliding." Daniel nodded. "I know." The words surprised him. How could he know? Because someone had already told him. Moments later, the tractor-trailer driver arrived. Together they forced the damaged door open just enough for the injured man to breathe more easily while they waited for emergency crews. Within minutes, the bridge glowed with flashing red and blue lights. Deputies, paramedics, highway patrol. Everything happened in a blur. Questions, photographs, measurements. Then a sheriff's deputy approached Daniel. The name stitched above his badge read, "Collins." "You were driving the gray sedan?" "Yes." "You hurt?" Daniel shook his head. "No, just shaken up." "I'd say that's understandable." Collins opened a small notebook. "Tell me what happened." Daniel drew a slow breath. He described the storm, the bus stop, the woman, her warnings, the bridge, the crash. He almost stopped there. Almost. Instead, he told the deputy everything, even the part that sounded impossible. When he finished, Deputy Collins didn't laugh. He didn't accuse Daniel of making it up. He simply closed his notebook. "Describe her." Daniel did. Dark hair, dark coat, early 30s. A soft voice. Sad eyes. The deputy stared into the rain for a long moment. Finally, he asked, "Did she smile?" Daniel thought back. "Once." "It didn't last." The deputy nodded slowly. "That's what I expected." A chill ran through Daniel that had nothing to do with the weather. "You know who I'm talking about." The deputy didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward the damaged guardrail. Daniel followed. Collins rested one hand on the cold steel. "This section," he said quietly, "was replaced 3 years ago." Daniel looked down. The bolts were newer than the rest. The paint was brighter. "What happened?" There was another crash. The deputy's voice grew distant, almost reflective. "A young woman was driving home during a storm. Weather just like tonight. She saw a pickup lose control. She tried to avoid it. The pickup missed her. But she hit the old guardrail." He looked toward the dark river below. It gave way. Daniel swallowed. "Did they find her?" "The next morning." Silence settled between them. Rainwater dripped from the brim of the deputy's hat. Daniel reached into his jacket. "I found this." He handed over the faded bus ticket. The deputy froze. His eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" "It was on my passenger seat." Collins turned the ticket over with extraordinary care. "I've seen this before." Daniel waited. "It was photographed during the investigation." He looked back at Daniel. "It belonged to the woman who died here." Daniel barely managed to speak. "What was her name?" The deputy answered without hesitation. "Claire Bennett." The name lingered between them. Neither man spoke. Finally, Daniel asked the question that had haunted him since the bridge. "Why did she save me?" The deputy looked back toward the river. "I don't know." Then he paused. "Maybe she didn't." Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Maybe, the deputy said softly. She was trying to save someone else. Daniel stared at him. The deputy continued. Claire Bennett had a reputation around here. If someone needed help, she stopped. Flat tires, dead batteries, people stranded in storms. It didn't matter. She always stopped. Something tightened in Daniel's chest. He thought of the old man in the faded green pickup. He thought of Emily. He thought of the promise he had been keeping all these years. The deputy looked directly at him. Funny thing is, no one can remember where she learned that. Daniel lowered his eyes. Almost to himself he whispered, I think I do. But the greatest mystery still remained. If Claire Bennett had died 3 years earlier, who had been sitting beside him for the last 12 minutes? The storm finally broke just after 1 o'clock. The rain softened to a gentle drizzle. Emergency crews cleared the bridge. The wrecked pickup was hauled onto a flatbed. Deputy Collins walked Daniel back to his car. Before opening the driver's door, Daniel glanced at the passenger seat. It was exactly as he'd left it. Empty, quiet, ordinary, and yet it no longer felt empty. Collins noticed where he was looking. You expecting someone? Daniel smiled faintly. I think she already left. The deputy said nothing. Instead, he reached into his pocket and unfolded a worn photograph. I probably shouldn't do this, he admitted. But I have a feeling it belongs with the rest of your night. He handed it to Daniel. The photograph showed a smiling woman standing beside an older model sedan. Dark hair, dark coat, kind eyes. Daniel's breath caught. It was her. Not older, not younger. Exactly as she had looked sitting beside him. He turned the photograph over. Written in blue ink across the back were 7 simple words. Claire Bennett, always the first to stop. Daniel looked up. Who wrote this? The officers who worked her accident. Collins folded his arms. They kept hearing the same thing from everyone in town. If your car broke down, Claire stopped. If you were lost, Claire stopped. If you needed help, Claire stopped. Daniel stared at the photograph. Without warning, his eyes filled with tears. He thought about the old man who had stopped for Emily. He thought about Claire. Neither of them had expected anything in return, yet both had changed the course of his life. Collins rested a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Maybe that's all we're here to do. Daniel looked at him. What? Help the next person. The deputy smiled. Sometimes that's enough. The drive home was quiet. The radio never came back on. Daniel didn't mind. He had more than enough to think about. When he finally pulled into his driveway, dawn was beginning to brighten the eastern sky. Before going inside, he opened his wallet. The faded bus ticket was still there. So was the date. 3 years earlier. He turned it over. The back was blank. Whatever words had once been there were gone. For a moment, he wondered if exhaustion had made him imagine them. Then he noticed something else. Tucked inside the fold of the ticket was a tiny white flower. Fresh, perfectly preserved. Daniel smiled. Some questions didn't need answers. The years passed. Daniel never spoke publicly about the woman on the bridge. People would have called it impossible. Maybe they would have been right. But one thing never changed. Whenever he saw someone stranded, he stopped. Not every time. Only when it was safe. Sometimes all a person needed was a phone call. Sometimes they needed a ride. Sometimes they simply needed to know they weren't alone. Daniel never waited for thanks. He simply remembered. 5 years later, another storm rolled across northern Georgia. Daniel was driving home after spending the evening grading papers at school. The rain looked almost identical. The highway felt strangely familiar. Then, through the blur of water on the windshield, he saw another bus stop. Old, weathered, standing alone beside the road. A teenage boy stood beneath the shelter, hugging a backpack tightly against his chest. Daniel slowed. A smile crossed his face. Someone should always stop. He pulled onto the shoulder. The boy hurried to the car. "Thank you," the teenager said as he climbed inside. "I didn't think anyone was coming." Daniel glanced through the windshield. "I almost kept driving." The boy gave a nervous smile. "I'm glad you didn't." Daniel shifted into drive. As the car pulled away, he glanced into the rearview mirror. The bus stop was gone. There was only the empty shoulder of the highway. No shelter, no sign, no footprints. Nothing. Daniel looked back at the road. He didn't smile because he had solved the mystery. He smiled because he no longer needed to. Some mysteries exist to be explained. Others exist to remind us who we choose to become. And somewhere, on a lonely stretch of highway, perhaps a woman named Claire Bennett was still keeping one final promise, helping one stranger at a time find their way home. The end. Thank you for turning the page with unlimited pages. If this story stayed with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe. This has been an Unlimited Pages original.